Story 1. The Ghost Mansion's Whisper. The air was sharp and thin as I climbed the winding path toward Villa de Vecchi, nestled high in the Italian Alps. It was late October, and the forest around Cortenova had turned a brittle gold, leaves crunching under my boots like fragile bones. The villa loomed ahead, its red facade cracked and peeling, half swallowed by ivy and time. Locals called it Casa delle Streghe, the House of Witches. I'd heard the stories: a cursed estate, a count driven to madness, a family shattered by violence. I didn't believe in ghosts, but I believed in stories, and this place had one I needed to tell. My recorder was clipped to my jacket, my breath fogging in the dusk. I was here to capture the truth of Villa de Vecchi, or at least whatever version of it I could find. The gate was rusted, hanging off its hinges like a broken jaw. I slipped through, my flashlight cutting a narrow beam across the overgrown gardens. Once, they'd been a marvel, Baroque designs blended with Eastern flourishes, fountains that sang under moonlight. Now, the paths were choked with weeds, and the fountains were dry, their stone basins cracked like old skin. The villa itself was worse, windows shattered, walls sagging, the roof caving in places. It looked like it was exhaling its last breath, but something about it felt alive, too alive. The air buzzed, not with sound, but with weight, like the moment before a storm breaks. I started recording. October 27th, 2025, Villa de Vecchi, Cortenova. I'm standing at the entrance. The place feels wrong, like it's watching me. My voice sounded too loud, too human against the silence. I stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under my weight. The grand foyer was a ruin. Frescoes of pastoral scenes peeled from the walls, their colors bled into grays. A massive fireplace gaped at one end, its hearth filled with ash and debris. Above it, a chandelier dangled, half its crystals missing, swaying slightly though there was no breeze. I moved deeper, my boots kicking up dust that danced my flashlight's beam. The stories swirled in my head. Count Felix de Vecchi, a war hero, built this place in the 1850s as a summer escape. In 1862, he came home to find his wife murdered, her face mutilated, her body sprawled in this very house. His daughter, barely a child, vanished. Felix searched for months, scouring the Alps, the forests, the rivers. Nothing. In despair, he hanged himself in the villa. His brother Biagio kept it in the family until after the war, then abandoned it. By the 1960s, it was empty, left to rot. And then the whispers started. Ghostly music, shadows in windows, a woman's silhouette in the halls. I reached what must have been the music room. A grand piano sat in the corner, its lid smashed, keys yellowed like old teeth. Locals swore it used to play on its own, eerie notes drifting through the valley at night. I ran my fingers over the keys, half expecting a sound, but they were mute. "Nothing here," I said into the recorder, but my voice wavered. The air felt heavier now, pressing against my chest. I turned to leave the room when I heard it, a faint hum, like a woman's voice, low and wordless, coming from upstairs. I froze. "Did you catch that?" I whispered into the recorder. I played back the last few seconds. Nothing but static and my own voice. I shook my head, blaming the wind or my imagination. But the hum came again, clearer now, pulling me toward the staircase. The steps were splintered, some missing entirely, but I climbed, my flashlight flickering as if the batteries were dying. They were new this morning. At the top, a long hallway stretched into darkness, doors hanging open, like empty mouths. The hum was louder here, vibrating in my bones. I followed it to a room at the end, its door half off its hinges. Inside, the walls were covered in graffiti, jagged symbols, names, dates. Some were fresh, scrawled in red paint that looked too much like blood. A child's shoe lay in the corner, caked in mud, its laces frayed. I didn't touch it. "This is unsettling," I recorded. "There's a shoe, looks old but not that old, and the humming, it's coming from this room." The hum stopped abruptly, replaced by a sharp creak behind me. I spun, my flashlight catching nothing but dust motes. My heart hammered. "Hello?" I called, my voice swallowed by the house. No answer. I backed out of the room, my beam sweeping the hall. For a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move, a flicker at the edge of my light, too tall to be human, too thin to be real. I blinked, and it was gone. I needed to keep moving. The next room was a bedroom. Its four-poster bed collapsed. The mattress rotted through. A mirror hung on the wall, cracked but intact, reflecting my pale face and wide eyes. I looked away, but something made me glance back. In the reflection, a figure stood behind me, a woman, her face blurred, her dress tattered. I whipped around, but the room was empty. My recorder caught my gasp, then static. When I checked the mirror again, it showed only me. "Get it together," I muttered, but my hand shook as I moved on. The villa seemed to shift around me, the walls leaning closer, the shadows thicker. I found a nursery next, its wallpaper peeling in strips, a broken crib in the center. The air here was colder, sharp enough to sting my lungs. I shone my light on the walls and froze. Scratched into the plaster were words, "She's still here." Below them, a child's drawing, a stick figure with no face holding a woman's hand. My recorder crackled. "I'm in the nursery. There's writing on the wall. I don't know who did this, but it's fresh. The air, it's too cold." As I spoke, a soft thud came from the crib. I approached, my light trembling. Inside was a doll, its porcelain face shattered, one glass eye staring up. I hadn't seen it before. I backed away, my breath shallow, and tripped over something soft. A scream caught in my throat. It was another shoe, matching the one from the other room, but this one was warm, as if someone had just worn it. I ran, the villa blurring around me, down the stairs, through the foyer, out into the garden. The cold air hit me like a slap, but I didn't stop until I was past the gate, my chest heaving. I checked my recorder, rewinding to the nursery. My voice was there, describing the writing, but after the thud, a new sound played, a child's giggle, high and clear, followed by a woman's whisper. "Stay." I didn't sleep that night. Back in my hotel, I pored over my notes, cross-referencing with old accounts. The Negri family, long-time caretakers, had admitted to scaring trespassers, dressing as ghosts to keep people away. But they'd left Cortenova years ago, and no one had taken their place. The villa was unguarded now, its gates open to anyone foolish enough to enter. I found a forum post from 2023, a hiker claiming they'd heard music from the villa at midnight, though they didn't dare go inside. Another from 2024 described a woman's silhouette in the upper windows, watching the valley below. I went back the next day. I had to. The story wasn't done. This time, I brought a better flashlight and a backup recorder. The villa looked different in daylight, less menacing but no less heavy. The air still buzzed, and the windows seemed to glint with something more than sunlight. I started in the music room, checking the piano again. The keys were untouched, but a single note rang out, As I stood there, sharp and sour, I jumped, my recorder catching the sound this time. That was real, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The piano just played. Upstairs, I avoided the nursery, heading instead for the master bedroom. The mirror was still there, its crack wider now, as if it had split further overnight. I kept my back to it, searching the room for anything new. In the corner, half hidden by a collapsed wardrobe, was a trap door. It wasn't on any floor plans I'd seen. The wood was warped, the handle rusted, but it opened with a groan, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. I should have left. Every instinct screamed it, but the story pulled me down, step by creaking step. The air grew damp, the walls tightened around me. At the bottom was a stone chamber, its walls slick with moss. In the center stood a child rocking horse, its paint chipped, its eyes painted black. Scattered around it were papers, letters, yellowed but legible. They were in Felix's handwriting, dated 1862. I hear her calling. One read, "She's in the walls, in the floors. I can't leave her." Another, "The house won't let us go." My flashlight flickered again. The rocking horse creaked, moving slightly, though no one touched it. I backed toward the stairs, my recorder running. This is a basement, maybe a cellar. There's a rocking horse, letters from Felix. It's... My voice cut off as the trapdoor slammed shut above me. The darkness was absolute, my flashlight dead. I fumbled for my phone, its weak light barely cutting the black. The rocking horse creaked again, faster now, a rhythmic groan like a heartbeat. I don't know how I got out. I remember clawing at the trapdoor, my nails splitting until it gave way. I stumbled through the villa, the halls twisting, the shadows moving. Outside the sun was gone, the sky bruised purple. My recorder was still in my hand, but when I played it back, the basement recording was gone. In its place was that giggle again, and the woman's whisper, "Stay." I left Cortenova that night. I didn't sleep for days, the villa's hum following me, a sound I couldn't shake. I uploaded my recordings online, hoping someone would make sense of them. Comments poured in. Some called it a hoax. Others shared their own stories. A local posted about a 2002 avalanche that destroyed nearby cottages but spared the villa as if it were protected. Another claimed the graffiti wasn't just vandalism. The symbols were old, deliberate, etched by hands that knew the house's secrets. Story 2, The Shadows of Charleville Mansion. My name is Arjun Mehra, and I'm a skeptic by nature. I've always dismissed ghost stories as overactive imaginations or tricks of the mind. But what happened to me at Charleville Mansion in Shimla changed everything. The abandoned Victorian villa, perched on a misty hilltop, wasn't just a ruin. It was alive with something I can't explain. This is my story, pieced together from the nights I spent there, each one unraveling a new layer of dread. It began with a dare. My friends Samir and Kavita knew I scoffed at the supernatural. We were in Shimla for a hiking trip, the crisp mountain air a stark contrast to Delhi's smog. Over steaming chai at a roadside stall, they brought up Charleville Mansion. "It's cursed, Arjun," Kavita said, her eyes glinting with mischief. "Locals say Lady Charlotte's ghost haunts it, and Captain Charles Pratt, the guy who killed himself there, he's still around pacing the grounds." I laughed, stirring my tea. "Ghosts? Come on, it's just an old house falling apart." Samir leaned in, grinning. "Prove it, then. Spend a night there, alone." The challenge hung in the air like the fog rolling over the hills. I couldn't back down. not with them smirking like that. So I agreed. One night in Charleville Mansion. Easy enough. The mansion loomed at the edge of Shimla, its iron gates rusted but imposing. The caretaker, a wiry man named Gopal, met me at dusk. His face was etched with unease as he handed me the key. "Don't go inside after dark," he warned, his voice low. "Things move in there, things you can't see." I brushed it off, thanking him as I slipped through the gate. The mansion's ivy-clad facade stared down at me, its gabled windows like empty eyes. The air felt heavy, colder than it should have been, but I chalked it up to the altitude. Inside, the house was a time capsule. Dust coated the chipped wooden floors, and cobwebs draped the chandeliers. The furniture, ornate chairs, a cracked mirror, was frozen in the 19th century. I set up my sleeping bag in the grand parlor, where a faded portrait of a stern-looking woman hung above the fireplace. Lady Charlotte, I assumed. Her painted gaze seemed to follow me as I unpacked my flashlight and notebook. I was here to document, to prove this was all nonsense. Night fell quickly. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the creak of the house settling. I scribbled notes, my flashlight cutting through the dark. Around midnight, I heard it, a faint thud from upstairs. My pulse quickened, but I told myself it was just the wind or a loose shutter. Then it came again, louder, like footsteps pacing above. I froze, straining to listen. The steps were deliberate, heavy, moving in a slow rhythm across the ceiling. Thud, thud, thud. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed the staircase, its wood groaning under my weight. The air grew colder with each step, my breath visible in the beam of light. At the top, a long hallway stretched into darkness, lined with closed doors. The footsteps stopped. I stood there, heart pounding, waiting for something, anything. Nothing came. Shaking my head, I turned back, convincing myself it was just the house playing tricks. Back in the parlor, I couldn't shake the unease. The portrait of Lady Charlotte seemed different. Her eyes looked wider, almost alive. I told myself it was fatigue, but as I lay in my sleeping bag, I heard it again. Footsteps, now closer, as if someone were circling the room. I bolted upright, sweeping the flashlight around. Nothing, just shadows dancing on the walls, but the air felt wrong, like it was pressing against me, thick with something I couldn't name. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I was exhausted, but triumphant. I'd survived, and there were no ghosts. I met Samir and Kavita at the chai stall, laughing off their questions. "Just an old house," I said, but deep down, I wasn't so sure. The footsteps, the cold, the portrait, they lingered in my mind like a splinter. A week later, I went back. Call it stubbornness or curiosity, but I needed answers. This time, I brought a voice recorder and a camera. Gopal was there again, his eyes narrowing when he saw me. "You're tempting fate," he muttered, but he let me in. The mansion felt different this time, more hostile. The air was thick, like it resisted my presence. I set up in the same parlor, the portrait of Lady Charlotte glaring down. I started recording, asking questions into the void. "Is anyone here, Lady Charlotte? Captain Pratt?" Silence answered, but the recorder's red light blinked steadily. Around 1 a.m., I heard a new sound, a low, guttural whisper, like words spoken underwater. It came from nowhere and everywhere, chilling my blood. I played back the recording, my hands trembling. Amid the static, a voice hissed, "Leave!" Clear as day. My stomach dropped. I checked the camera, nothing but grainy darkness. Then came the laughter, soft at first, like a child's giggle. It echoed from the hallway. I followed it, flashlight shaking in my grip. The laughter grew louder, sharper, until it filled the house. At the end of the upstairs hallway, a door stood ajar. I hadn't noticed it last time. It was heavy oak, carved with intricate vines. I pushed it open, revealing a small room with a single window. The air inside was frigid, the window frosted despite the warm September night. On the floor lay a scattering of papers, yellowed letters, their ink faded. I picked one up, my flashlight illuminating spidery handwriting. It was signed Charles Pratt. The words were frantic, describing a presence that watched him, that moved his belongings when he slept. My heart raced as I read. Had Pratt heard the same laughter, the same footsteps? Before I could read more, the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, yanking at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The laughter stopped, replaced by a low moan that seemed to seep from the walls. Panic clawed at me. I pounded on the door, shouting for no one. Then, in the corner of my eye, I saw her, a pale figure in a white dress, standing by the window. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared with hollow eyes. I stumbled back, my flashlight flickering. "Who are you?" I whispered. The figure vanished, and the door creaked open on its own. I ran, not stopping until I was outside, gasping in the night air. I should have stayed away, but the mansion had its hooks in me. 3 nights later, I returned, armed with more equipment, motion sensors, a thermal camera, anything to make sense of what I'd seen. Gopal refused to let me in, but I slipped through a gap in the fence at midnight. The mansion felt alive now, its shadows shifting like they were watching. I set up the motion sensors in the parlor and hallway. The thermal camera trained on the staircase. At 2 a.m., the sensors went off. Beeping filled the house as every device lit up. I checked the thermal camera. Blobs of cold blue moved across the screen, forming a human shape descending the stairs. My mouth went dry. I called out, "Who's there?" No answer, but the air grew icy, my breath clouding. Then from the hallway came a sound like furniture dragging across the floor. I followed it, heart hammering, to the same oak door upstairs. This time, the room was different. The papers were gone, replaced by a single chair facing the window. On it sat a small, cracked mirror, reflecting nothing but darkness. I approached, my reflection appearing in the glass, except it wasn't me. The face was pale, with sunken eyes and a twisted smile. I dropped the mirror, and it shattered, the sound swallowed by a sudden, deafening silence. Then the house erupted. Doors slammed upstairs, windows rattled, and footsteps thundered from every direction. I ran, tripping down the stairs, my equipment abandoned. In the parlor, the portrait of Lady Charlotte was gone, replaced by a blank wall. But as I turned to flee, I saw her again, the woman in white, standing at the far end of the room. She raised a hand, pointing at me, and whispered, "You shouldn't have come back." I don't remember leaving. I woke up outside the gate, my clothes torn, my flashlight gone. The mansion stood silent, its windows dark. I never told Samir or Kavita the full story. They wouldn't believe me. But I know what I saw, what I heard. Charleville Mansion isn't just haunted, it's alive, and it doesn't let go. I still hear the laughter sometimes in my dreams, and I wonder if I ever truly left that house behind. Story 3, The Lucy Murder House. I am the Hardie Coleman house, a sagging relic in Uniontown, Alabama, my weathered clapboard walls and crumbling porch a testament to a horror that festers within me. Built in the early 20th century, I was once a modest home, unremarkable in this quiet town. But in March 1985, I became something else. A tomb, a witness, a keeper of a secret so vile it would take nearly a decade to claw its way into the light. My story is not one of ghosts or specters, but of a real, bone-deep terror that unfolded within my walls. Listen closely, for I will tell you of the murder of Alan Lucy, the boy whose blood stained my foundation, and the slow unraveling of the truth that followed. It was a chilly March evening in 1985 when the air inside me grew heavy. Alan Lucy, a slight 13-year-old with a quiet demeanor, lived here with his adoptive parents, Philip and Margaret Lucy, and his younger brother Jason. I felt the tension in their footsteps, the way the floorboards creaked under Philip's heavy tread, the way Margaret's pacing quickened in the dim kitchen light. Alan was a soft-spoken boy, often lost in his thoughts, his small frame barely disturbing my aging boards. Jason, just 12, was sharper, his eyes always watching, always wary. That night, I heard raised voices in the living room. Philip's voice boomed sharp and jagged, while Alan's responses were barely audible, trembling. I couldn't see what sparked the argument. My walls don't have eyes, but I felt the shift the moment the air turned sour. A thud echoed through my frame, a sickening crack that seemed to splinter the very beams holding me upright. It came from the back room, where Alan slept on a thin mattress. Jason's footsteps, quick and light, darted toward the sound, then stopped. I heard his sharp intake of breath, a stifled cry, then silence, the kind that presses against your ribs and makes you wish you could scream. The next morning, Alan was gone. Philip and Margaret told the town he'd run away, a troubled kid who couldn't handle their rules. The police came, their boots scuffing my porch, but they believed the story. Alan was just another runaway, they said, his name scribbled on a missing persons report and filed away. But Jason, that small, fierce boy, knew better. I heard him whispering to his friends at school, his voice low and urgent. "My father killed Alan. He hit him in the head. I saw him digging in the backyard." His words were like knives, cutting through the lies Philip and Margaret wove. But no one listened. The town saw a grieving family, not a crime scene. I wanted to scream, to collapse my walls and expose the truth, but I could only stand silent, my foundation hiding a secret I couldn't reveal. Years passed, and the Lucys stayed within me, their lives a grim pantomime. Philip's temper grew darker, his heavy step shaking my floors. Margaret's silence was louder, her eyes darting to the backyard whenever she thought no one was watching. Jason, though, never forgot. I heard him late at night, whispering Alan's name, as if saying it could bring his brother back. He was a boy carrying a truth too heavy for his shoulders, and I ached for him, my windows rattling in the wind as if to echo his pain. In 1993, everything changed. The Lucys had moved out by then, leaving me empty, my paint peeling and my roof leaking. They'd tried to burn me down, you see. Arson for insurance money, a desperate act to erase their past. The fire charred my walls, but I stood, defiant, my bones too stubborn to crumble. A new owner bought me, planning to tear me down and build anew. That's when the truth began to surface, like a body rising from a shallow grave. On October 27th, 1993, demolition workers came with their tools, their voices loud and careless. One of them, Ron Adams, was digging under my front porch, prying up bricks and dirt. I felt the shovel strike something soft, something wrong. Ron froze, his hands trembling as he unearthed a plastic garbage bag, heavy and sagging. Inside, wrapped in a Mickey Mouse blanket, were human bones, small, fragile, unmistakably a child's. I wanted to weep as the workers stared, their faces paling. The police came again, this time with grim purpose. The bones were Alan's, confirmed by tests, his skull bearing the marks of a brutal blow. My backyard, my porch, my very earth had held him all those years, a silent witness to his murder. The Lucys were already in custody, arrested for the arson just a week before. When news of the bones broke, the investigators turned their eyes to Philip. I could almost feel his panic, the way he'd paced my floors years ago, now trapped in a cell. He tried to deflect, his voice smooth, as he told jailers the skeleton was probably put there by pranksters. But the truth was out, and it was relentless. Jason, now a young man, stepped forward, his voice steady despite the weight of his memories. In the courtroom, he faced his father and told the world what he'd seen that night in 1985. Philip striking Alan in the head, the boy crumpling, the frantic digging in the dark. I wished I could have stood beside him, my walls testifying to the echoes of that awful thud. The trial was a spectacle, Uniontown buzzing with whispers. The prosecution painted a chilling picture. Philip, a man consumed by rage, killing his son and burying him beneath my porch, then spinning a lie to keep the world at bay. Margaret, complicit or coerced, stayed silent, her role unclear, but her guilt heavy. In 1997, the jury found Philip guilty of murder. He appealed, dragging the case through years of legal wrangling, but a 2001 retrial sealed his fate. The day after the second guilty verdict, Philip hanged himself in his cell, his death a final act of cowardice. I felt no pity, only a hollow relief that he could no longer harm. Alan's bones, those small broken remnants, were finally laid to rest in 2001. The people of Uniontown, horrified by the story, raised money for a proper burial, giving the boy the dignity he'd been denied. I stood empty, my charred walls and sagging porch a grim monument to his loss. No one wanted to live in me, and I didn't blame them. I was the Lucy murder house now, my name whispered in fear, my story a warning. Today, I still stand in Uniontown, abandoned and decaying. The wind whistles through my broken windows, and the earth beneath my porch feels heavier, as if Alan's absence lingers. I am no haunted house, in the way you might think. No spirits roam my halls, but I am haunted by memory, by the weight of a boy's life stolen within my walls, by the truth Jason carried when no one would listen. If you pass by, you might feel it too, the chill of a secret kept too long, the echo of a crime that refuses to fade. I am the Hardie Coleman house, and I will never forget. Story 4. Summerwind Lamont Mansion, Land O'Lakes, Wisconsin, USA. I was 16 when my family moved to Land O'Lakes, Wisconsin, chasing a quiet life in the North Woods. Our new home was a modest cabin, tucked among towering pines on the shores of West Bay Lake. The air was crisp, the lake shimmered like glass, and the isolation felt like a balm after the chaos of city life. But the locals spoke of a place nearby that made my skin prickle, Summerwind Mansion, or as some still called it, the Lamont House. They said it was cursed, a ruin swallowed by the forest, where the walls breathed and the shadows had eyes. I didn't believe in ghosts until the summer of 1987, when I stepped into its charred remains and learned what fear truly meant. It started with a dare. My new friend Tommy, a wiry kid with a knack for trouble, told me about Summerwind one night by the lake. "It's not just a house," he whispered, his eyes glinting in the firelight. "It's alive. People go in and don't come out the same." He said the mansion had burned down the year before, struck by lightning, but the stories hadn't died. Kids sneaked onto the private land to prove their courage, only to come back pale and silent. Tommy bet I wouldn't last an hour inside the ruins. I laughed it off, but the challenge stuck in my head like a splinter. The next Saturday, we biked through the woods, the trail narrowing until it was just a thread of dirt winding past gnarled cedars. The air grew heavy, the bird song fading as we neared the property line. A rusted "no trespassing" sign hung crookedly on a tree, but Tommy just smirked and pedaled on. My stomach twisted, but I followed. We stashed our bikes in the brush and crept forward until the ruins came into view. Summerwind's skeleton loomed against the gray sky. Two blackened chimneys jutted like broken teeth, and the fieldstone foundation was choked with weeds. Shattered beams lay scattered, their edges scorched. The lake glittered beyond, indifferent to the decay. I expected an empty husk, but the place felt watchful, like it knew we were there. Tommy nudged me. "You chickening out already?" I shook my head, ignoring the chill crawling up my spine. We stepped over the crumbled threshold, our sneakers crunching on ash. The wind whistled through the pines, but inside the ruins it was too quiet, like the world held its breath. The foundation formed a rough rectangle with jagged walls marking where rooms once stood. I tried to picture the grand mansion it had been. 20 rooms, polished wood, chandeliers, but all I saw was ruin. We explored cautiously at first, poking at debris with sticks. Tommy found a rusted doorknob and pocketed it, grinning. "Souvenir," he said. I didn't laugh. The deeper we went, the stranger it felt. The air seemed to thicken, pressing against my chest. I kept glancing over my shoulder, sure I'd see someone or something behind me. Tommy didn't notice, too busy kicking at a pile of bricks. Then he froze. "You hear that?" he whispered. I did. A faint sound, like footsteps dragging across stone, coming from the far end of the ruins. My heart thudded. "Probably just the wind," I said, but my voice shook. The sound came again, slower, deliberate. Tommy's grin was gone. We edged toward the noise, past a crumbling wall, until we reached what looked like the remains of a staircase leading down. The steps vanished into darkness, the basement yawning below like a mouth. The dragging stopped, replaced by a low hum, almost like a voice murmuring words I couldn't catch. "Let's check it out," Tommy said, but he didn't move. I wanted to run, but my feet felt rooted. Then from the shadows below came a sharp creak, like a door swinging open. My flashlight beam caught something, a glint of movement, pale and fleeting, at the bottom of the stairs. "Tommy!" I hissed, grabbing his arm. He yanked free, his face pale. "I saw it too," he muttered. We should have left then, but curiosity, or stupidity, pulled us forward. We descended the stairs, each step creaking under our weight. The air grew colder, damp with the smell of earth and ash. At the bottom, the basement was a maze of collapsed beams and rubble. My flashlight flickered, casting jagged shadows. The hum was louder now, weaving through the dark like a thread. I followed it, my pulse hammering, until we reached a corner where the foundation met a cracked wall. There, half buried in debris, was a wooden door, its surface scarred with two small round holes. Bullet holes. I'd heard the story. Robert Lamont, the mansion's first owner, firing at a ghost in the dining room. My mouth went dry. Tommy touched the door, his fingers trembling. "This is it," he whispered. "The door he shot through." The hum stopped abruptly, and in the silence, something scraped against the other side of the door. Slow, deliberate, like nails on wood. We stumbled back, my flashlight dropping and rolling across the floor. Its beam landed on the door just as it shuddered, as if something heavy leaned against it. "Run!" Tommy yelled. We scrambled up the stairs, my legs burning, the air thick with the sound of our own panic. I glanced back once, sure I'd see something following, but the darkness was empty. We burst into the daylight, gasping, and didn't stop running until we reached our bikes. My hand shook so badly I could barely grip the handlebars. Tommy didn't speak the whole way home, his face ashen. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the cabin made me jump. Every shadow seemed to move. Around midnight, I heard it, a faint hum, like the one from the basement, drifting through my window. I told myself it was my imagination, but when I looked outside, the lake was still, the pines unmoving. The sound was coming from the woods, from the direction of Summerwind. The next day, Tommy didn't show up at school. I called his house, but his mom said he was sick, locked in his room and refusing to talk. I went to his place after class, my stomach knotted. He let me in, but looked like he hadn't slept, his eyes red-rimmed. "It followed me," he whispered, glancing at the door like it might open. He showed me the doorknob he'd taken, now sitting on his desk. It was cold to the touch, unnaturally so, and when I held it, the hum started again, faint but unmistakable. Tommy said he'd heard footsteps in his house at night, seen shadows in his mirror. He swore he'd woken up to find the doorknob on his pillow, though he'd left it in a drawer. I didn't want to believe him, but the hum was real, and the fear in his eyes was too. "We need to put it back," I said. He nodded, but I could tell he was terrified. We returned to Summerwind that weekend, the doorknob wrapped in a rag in my backpack. The ruins looked the same, but the air felt heavier, like a storm was brewing. We hurried to the basement, the hum growing louder with every step. When we reached the bullet-hole door, Tommy hesitated, his hand shaking. "I can't," he said, backing away. I took the doorknob out, my fingers numb from its cold, and placed it on the ground in front of the door. The hum stopped, but the silence was worse, like the calm before a scream. Then the door creaked open, not wide, just a crack, but enough to show a sliver of darkness beyond. Something moved inside, a pale shape that flickered like a bad film reel. My breath caught, and I grabbed Tommy's arm, pulling him toward the stairs. We ran, the ruins blurring around us, the sound of our footsteps drowned by a sudden rush of wind that seemed to come from nowhere. When we reached the bikes, I looked back. The chimneys stood stark against the sky, and for a moment I thought I saw a figure, a woman in white, her hair streaming like smoke, standing among the ruins. Then she was gone. Tommy moved away that summer. His family didn't say why, but I heard he'd stopped talking much. kept his room locked. I never went back to Summerwind, but the hum followed me for years, faint and fleeting, like a memory I couldn't shake. The locals still talk about the mansion, about the woman in white who waves at boats, about piano notes drifting through the pines. Some say it's just stories, but I know better. Summerwind isn't just a place, it's a trap, waiting for the next fool to step inside. Last week, I drove past West Bay Lake for the first time in decades. The woods were thicker, the trail to the ruins nearly gone. I didn't stop, but as I passed, my radio crackled, and for a moment I heard it again, that hum, low and insistent, calling me back. I kept driving, my hands tight on the wheel, and didn't look in the rearview mirror. Some things are better left behind. Story 5. The Woman in White. I am Elena, a restoration worker at Pidhirtsi Castle, a crumbling 17th century palace in the heart of Lviv Oblast's forests. My job is to piece together the past. Dusty tapestries, shattered mosaics, and splintered wood from a fortress that's been looted, burned, and abandoned more times than anyone can count. The castle's history is written in its scars. Grand halls reduced to ash, staircases leading to collapsed ceilings, and mirrors reflecting nothing but decay. But it's not the history that keeps me awake at night. It's her, the woman in white. They say she's Maria Javuska, sealed alive in these walls centuries ago, her spirit trapped in the plaster and stone. I didn't believe the stories at first. I'm a practical woman, trained to measure, repair, and preserve, but after what I've seen, heard, and felt in this place, I know she's real, and she's not at rest. It started on my first night shift 3 months ago. The castle is eerie after dark, its corridors swallowing light like a hungry beast. My team was small, just me, Taras, and Irina, tasked with cataloging artifacts in the Golden Hall, a cavernous room once draped in gilded tapestries, now a skeleton of cracked marble and peeling paint. The air was thick with dust, and our lanterns barely pushed back the shadows. Taras was muttering about the cold, though it was a warm September evening. Irina, usually chatty, was silent, her eyes darting to the corners of the room. "Do you hear that?" Irina whispered, her voice barely audible over the creak of the floorboards. I froze, straining to listen. Nothing but the wind rattling the broken windows. "Hear what?" I asked, brushing it off. Irina shook her head, her face pale, and went back to photographing a shattered vase. Taras didn't look up from his clipboard, but I noticed his hands trembling. That's when I heard it, a faint tapping, like fingers brushing against stone. It came from the far wall, where a faded mural of a hunting scene was barely visible. I told myself it was the building settling, old stones shifting under their own weight. Pidhirtsi was full of noises, groans, creaks, the occasional skitter of rodents, but this was different, rhythmic, deliberate. I stepped closer to the wall, my flashlight beam shaking in my grip. The tapping stopped. Silence pressed against my ears, heavy and unnatural. "Let's finish up," I said, my voice louder than I intended. Taras and Irina didn't argue. We packed our tools and left the hall, the air feeling colder as we stepped into the corridor. I glanced back at the mural, half expecting to see something, a shadow, a face. There was nothing, but the hairs on my neck stood up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us leave. The next week, I was alone in the library, sorting through fragments of books so old Their pages crumbled at my touch. The library was my favorite room, despite its ruin. Shelves towered to the ceiling, their wood warped but still standing, holding the ghosts of thousands of volumes long since stolen or burned. A single chandelier hung crookedly, its crystals catching the dim glow of my lantern. I was kneeling, piecing together a torn manuscript, when I felt it, a presence, like someone standing just behind me. I turned, expecting Taras or Irina playing a prank. No one was there. The room was empty, the door still locked from the inside. Then I heard the footsteps, soft, deliberate, pacing the length of the room. They weren't heavy like boots on stone, but light, like bare feet gliding across the floor. I held my breath, my heart hammering. The footsteps stopped near the far end of the library, where a cracked mirror leaned against the wall. I forced myself to stand, my legs unsteady, and aimed my flashlight at the mirror. The beam caught the glass, and for a moment I saw her. She was pale, her skin almost translucent, her white gown flowing like mist. Her face was beautiful but hollow, her eyes dark and endless, staring straight at me. I stumbled back, dropping my flashlight. It hit the floor with a clatter, and the light went out. Darkness swallowed the room. I fumbled for my spare lantern, my hand shaking so badly I could barely twist the knob. When the light flickered on, the mirror was empty. No woman, no gown, just my own terrified reflection staring back. I didn't tell Taras or Irina. They'd think I was losing it, and maybe I was. But the next day, I found something in the library. A single white rose, its petals fresh and soft, lying on the floor in front of the mirror. No one had been in the castle overnight except me. No one could have left it there. The incidents grew stranger as the weeks passed. Tools went missing, only to reappear in rooms we hadn't touched. Doors we locked at night were found ajar by morning. Once, Irina swore she saw a shadow move across the ballroom ceiling, though no one was there to cast it. Taras started refusing to work alone, claiming he heard whispers in the corridors, words he couldn't quite make out. I didn't admit it, but I'd heard them too, soft, mournful, like a woman calling for someone lost. One night, I stayed late to finish reinforcing a staircase in the west wing. It was the stone staircase, the one locals whispered about, where Maria was supposedly walled up. I didn't believe the story, not entirely, but I avoided that staircase when I could. That night, I had no choice. The steps were crumbling, and we needed them stable for the next phase of restoration. I was alone, my hammer echoing in the empty hall, when I heard it again, the tapping. It came from below, from the base of the staircase where the stone met the wall. I knelt, pressing my ear to the cold stone. The tapping grew louder, faster, like someone desperate to be heard. My pulse raced, but I couldn't pull away. Then a whisper, so faint I thought I imagined it. "Help me," it said, the voice soft and broken. I jerked back, my hammer slipping from my hand. The air turned frigid, my breath visible in the lantern's glow. I grabbed my tools and ran, not stopping until I was outside, the castle looming behind me like a predator in the dark. I started researching Maria Javuska, digging through what little records we had. The story was murky. Some said she was bricked up for infidelity, others for failing to bear a child. The dates didn't add up. Maria lived decades before the castle was even built, according to one crumbling ledger. But the legend persisted, woven into the castle's bones. I found sketches of her in an old archive, her face delicate and haunting, her eyes carrying a sadness that felt alive. I couldn't stop thinking about it, about what it must feel like to be trapped unseen, unheard for centuries. The final straw came last week. We were in the ballroom, measuring the walls for new supports. The room was vast, its ceiling painted with faded cherubs, its floor littered with broken tiles. I was marking measurements when Irina screamed. She was staring at one of the long mirrors lining the walls, her face white as bone. "She's there," she stammered, pointing at the glass. I looked, but saw only our reflections, mine, Taras's, Irina's, no one else. "I saw her," Irina insisted, her voice shaking. "She was right behind you, Olena. Her hand was on your shoulder." Taras grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the door, but I couldn't move. I stared at the mirror, my skin crawling. There was nothing there, but I felt it, a weight on my shoulder, light but unmistakable, like fingers resting against my jacket. That night, I went back alone. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted answers, or maybe she was calling me. I stood in the ballroom, my lantern casting long shadows across the mirrors. "Maria," I said, my voice trembling, "if you're here, show me. Tell me what you want." The air grew heavy, the silence suffocating. Then, one by one, the mirrors began to crack. Not shatter, just crack. Thin spiderweb lines spreading across the glass, and in every mirror I saw her, the woman in white, her gown glowing faintly, her eyes locked on mine. She didn't speak, but her lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. I backed away, my heart pounding, and tripped over a loose tile. When I looked up, she was gone. The mirrors were whole again, no cracks, no figure. But on the floor where I'd fallen was another white rose, its petals curling at the edges. I haven't told anyone what happened. Taras and Irina are jumpy enough, and the restoration project is behind schedule. But I can't stay in the castle alone anymore. Every creak, every shadow feels like her. I see her in my dreams now, standing at the edge of my vision, her white gown trailing across the floor. Last night, I woke up to find my bedroom window open, a single white rose on the sill. I live 3 towns away from Pidhirtsi. There's no way it could have gotten there. I don't know what Maria wants. Freedom, revenge, or something else. But I know she's not just a story. She's here, in the walls, in the mirrors, in the air I breathe, and I think she's chosen me. Every night I hear the tapping, faint but growing louder, like she's clawing her way out. I don't know how much longer I can keep working at Pidhirtsi. I don't know how much longer I can ignore her. Story 6. The Arsenal's Last Watch. I am the castle on Pollepel Island, a crumbling monument to ambition and ruin. My stones, once proud and defiant against the Hudson River's currents, now sag under the weight of time and calamity. I was born from the dreams of Francis Bannerman, a man whose fortune was forged in the trade of weapons, tools of war that I was meant to cradle in my chambers. But this island, this jagged outcrop in the river's heart, was never meant for such burdens. The air here hums with unease, as if the very earth rejects my presence. The native peoples knew this long before Bannerman's ships docked, their warnings of restless spirits whispered on the wind. I have stood for over a century, and I have seen things that cling to the shadows of my walls, things that move when no one is watching. My story begins in 1901, when my towers first rose, a strange echo of medieval fortresses in a world of steam and steel. Bannerman, with his sharp eyes and sharper mind, saw me as a vault for his surplus arms. Crates of rifles, cannons, and powder kegs stacked high in my belly. I was his fortress, his legacy, built to withstand time itself. Workers carved my foundations into the island's rocky spine, their hammers ringing late into the night. But even then, I felt it, a tremor beneath the soil, a pulse that wasn't mine. The laborers spoke in hushed tones of eyes in the fog, of footsteps where no one walked. One man swore he saw a figure in tattered cloth standing on the shore, staring up at my unfinished walls. When he blinked, it was gone. I stood complete by the end of that year, my turrets piercing the sky, my armory filled with enough firepower to wage a small war. Bannerman visited often, pacing my halls, inspecting the crates. He never stayed long. The island's chill seemed to seep into him, and I noticed how his gaze lingered on the dark corners of my rooms. Once, he paused at a window, staring out at the river. "They warned me," he muttered, his breath fogging the glass. "They said this place doesn't belong to us." I wanted to ask who they were, but I am only stone and mortar. I cannot speak. I can only watch. The first catastrophe came in 1918, a night when the sky roared with fury. Lightning split the heavens, and one jagged bolt found its mark in my armory. 2 tons of munitions, powder, shells, and dreams erupted in a single, cataclysmic breath. The explosion tore through me like a scream, shattering my western wing, hurling stone and steel into the river. The blast's heat scorched my walls, and the shock wave rattled my core. I felt my body fracture, my strength bleed away. In the village across the water, windows shattered, and locals whispered of dark spirits angered by Bannerman's hubris. Experts later blamed the lightning, but I know better. Something wanted me broken. The night after the explosion, I saw them for the first time, shapes in the dark, gliding through my ruined halls. They wore no faces, only the vague outlines of men. Soldiers, perhaps, or something older. They moved with purpose, their steps silent but heavy, as if carrying the weight of forgotten battles. One paused near the blasted armory, its head tilting as if listening to the echo of the detonation. I felt its gaze, cold and unyielding, searching for something I could not name. By dawn, they were gone, but their presence lingered, a stain on my stones. Bannerman returned, his face grim as he surveyed the wreckage. He ordered repairs, but the workers were uneasy. Tools went missing. Lanterns flickered without wind. One man, a burly mason, fled the island after claiming a hand gripped his shoulder in an empty corridor. "It wasn't human," he stammered to his crew, his face pale as the river's mist. Bannerman dismissed the stories, but I saw the doubt in his eyes. He left sooner than planned, and I wondered if he felt them too, the watchers in the shadows. The years passed, and I stood wounded but defiant. The river's fog wrapped me in a shroud, and the island grew quieter, save for the occasional creak of my settling bones. Bannerman's visits dwindled, his empire strained by the war's end and the explosion's cost. I was left to the elements, to the whispers of the wind that carried voices I could not understand. Then, in 1950, the river itself turned against me. The freighter Pollepel steamed too close, its hull grinding against the island's rocky edge. A spark, a leak, a moment of chaos, and the ship erupted in a fireball that rivaled the lightning's wrath. The shock wave slammed into me, toppling walls already weakened by time and neglect. My eastern tower crumbled, its stones splashing into the Hudson like tears. The crew perished, their screams swallowed by the river, and I felt the island shudder beneath me, as if it too mourned. The locals spoke of curses, of the island's vengeance, but I knew it was no accident. Something had drawn that ship to its doom, just as it had called the lightning years before. That night, the shapes returned. More of them now, their forms sharper, their movements restless. They gathered in my courtyard, a silent assembly under the moon's pale light. One stood apart, taller than the rest, its silhouette jagged like a broken blade. It raised a hand, and I swear the air grew colder, the stars dimmer. I wanted to scream, to warn the world, but I am only a castle bound to silence. They vanished with the dawn, but I felt their promise. They were not done with me. By 1969, I was a husk, my halls open to the sky, my armory a graveyard of rusted relics. Bannerman was long gone, his family scattered, his dream of me forgotten. I stood alone, save for the river's endless song and the shadows that never left. Then came the fire. No one knows how it started. A spark, perhaps, or a trespasser's carelessness. But I felt it before I saw it. A heat that wasn't mine. A hunger that consumed my wooden beams and scorched my stones black. The flames roared through me, a beast with no master, and I could do nothing but burn. My keep, my heart, collapsed into ash, leaving only my outer walls to stand as a hollow monument. The shapes were there that night, watching from the edges of the blaze. They stood unmoved by the heat, their forms flickering like ghosts in the firelight. One stepped closer, its head turning toward my highest tower, where the last of Bannerman's crates lay untouched. It reached out, and I felt a jolt, as if it had touched my very soul. The fire died soon after, but not before it took what little I had left. I was no longer a castle, only a ruin, a skeleton of stone clinging to an island that hated me. Now, in 2025, I am a relic, a curiosity for tourists who brave the river to walk my broken paths. The state calls me a park, props my walls with steel, and sends guides to tell my story. They speak of Bannerman, of explosions and fires, but they never mention the shapes. They don't see what I see. At dusk, when the last boat leaves and the island falls silent, the shadows return. They walk my halls, their numbers growing with each passing year. Some are soldiers, their outlines bearing the weight of old wars. Others are older, their forms indistinct, as if carved from the island's own darkness. Last night, a new figure joined them. It was different, solid, almost human. It wore a coat like Bannerman's, but its face was wrong. Too still, too pale. It stood in my courtyard, staring up at my broken towers, and I felt a chill deeper than any winter. It spoke, its voice a low rasp that echoed through my stones. "This place is ours," it said, and the other shapes turned as if in agreement. I don't know what they want, but I feel it in my core. They are waiting. For what, I cannot say. The tour boats come each morning, their passengers snapping photos of my mossy arches and crumbling walls. They laugh, call me haunted, but they don't stay long. The guides warn them not to linger after dark, citing crumbling stone and treacherous paths. But I know the truth. The island doesn't want them here. It never did. The signs from the Archaeological Society nailed to my gates forbid entry at night. They don't say why, but I feel it in the air, in the way the river's current slows as the sun sets. I am Bannerman's castle, or what's left of it. My walls are scarred, my halls empty, but I am not alone. The shapes are my keepers now, my sentries in the dark. They watch, they wait, and I wonder if they'll ever leave. The river flows on, carrying whispers of the past, and I stand as I always have, silent, broken, and bound to this cursed island. If you come, tread lightly. The stones may hold, but the shadows are always watching. Story 7. The Whispering Walls of Château Miranda. I am Château Miranda, or what remains of me. My stones, once proud and gleaming, now crumble under the weight of ivy and time. My towers, which pierced the Ardennes sky, are jagged teeth gnawed by storms and neglect. I was born in 1866. Crafted by the hands of men who dreamed of grandeur, my neo-Gothic spires a testament to the Liedekerke-Beaufort family's ambition. For decades, I stood as their summer sanctuary, my hundreds of rooms filled with laughter and footsteps. But those days are long gone. Now, I am a hollow shell, a stage for shadows and whispers. Listen closely, for I have a story to tell, a tale of dread that clings to my bones, woven from the lives that passed through me and the terrors that linger still. The summer of 1952. My halls were alive then, not with the elegance of nobility, but with the clamor of children. After the war, I was no longer a chateau, but a holiday home for sickly youngsters run by the Belgian Railway Company. Up to 200 children filled me each summer, their small feet pattering across my wooden floors, their voices echoing in my vaulted ceilings. But even then, something was wrong. I felt it in the way the air grew heavy at night, in the way certain rooms, those deep in my western wing, seemed to swallow sound. There was a boy named Elias, pale and frail, with eyes too large for his face. He arrived that summer, clutching a tattered book of fairy tales. The other children avoided him. He preferred my empty corners, reading alone in the dim light of my cracked windows. One night, I felt him pause outside the locked door of the old music room, a place the staff forbade anyone to enter. The door was heavy oak, its carvings of vines and gargoyles worn smooth by time. Elias pressed his ear against it, and I swear I felt a shiver ripple through my stones. He whispered, "Who's there?" No one answered, but I heard it too, a faint scratching, like fingernails dragging across the other side. Elias returned night after night, each time lingering longer, his breath fogging the keyhole. The staff noticed his wanderings and scolded him, but he wouldn't stop. One moonless night, I felt the door creak open. How? I don't know. The key had been lost for years. Elias slipped inside, and the door slammed shut behind him. I felt his panic, his small fists pounding against the wood. The air in the music room grew thick, oppressive, as if something else was there watching. Hours passed, and when the staff finally broke down the door at dawn, Elias was gone. His book lay open on the floor, its pages torn as if clawed apart. They searched my grounds, the forest, the river beyond, but he was never found. The children whispered of a shadow man who lived in the music room, but the adults dismissed it. I knew better. Something had claimed Elias, and it wasn't done. The fire of 1995. By the 1990s, I was abandoned. The railway company had sold me back to the Liedekerke-Beauforts, but they couldn't afford my upkeep. My roofs leaked, my floors rotted, and my walls sagged under the weight of neglect. I was a relic, forgotten by all but the curious and the reckless. Urban explorers came, their flashlights slicing through my darkness, their laughter nervous as they dared each other to climb my crumbling stairs. One night in 1995, I felt a spark in my eastern wing, where the old library stood. It was small at first, a flicker in the wiring left to decay, but it grew, hungry, devouring my wooden beams and tapestries. The fire roared through me, a beast I couldn't fight. My roofs collapsed, my interiors charred black. The explorers who'd been there fled, but one, a young woman named Clara, didn't make it out. I felt her screams as the flames trapped her in the library, her hands clawing at a window that wouldn't open. When the fire died, they found her body, but her face was unmarked, her eyes wide with terror, as if she'd seen something worse than the flames. The fire left me scarred, my eastern wing a skeleton of blackened stone. But it wasn't the end. Clara's presence lingered. At night, I felt her footsteps pacing the library's ruins, her sobs echoing where no one walked. Explorers who came after spoke of a woman's shadow darting through my halls, her voice whispering, "Help me." Some claimed their cameras caught her face in the smoke-stained windows, her mouth open in a silent scream. I knew the truth. Clara was trapped, bound to me by whatever force had taken Elias decades before. The storm of 2006. A decade later, I was weaker still. The 2006 storm tore through the Ardennes, its winds howling like a living thing. My stable roof, already sagging, collapsed in a cascade of slate and timber, exposing my innards to the rain. The forest around me grew wilder, its roots creeping into my foundations as if reclaiming me for the earth. But the storm brought something else, a group of explorers, thrill-seekers, drawn by my reputation as a haunted ruin. There were 4 of them, Marek, Lena, Thomas, and Sophia. They came at dusk, their backpacks heavy with gear, their voices loud to mask their fear. Marek, the leader, scoffed at the ghost stories, but I felt his pulse quicken as they crossed my threshold. They set up camp in my grand hall, where the chandelier had long since crashed to the floor. As night fell, they explored, their flashlights dancing across my graffiti-covered walls. Lena was the first to notice the cold. She shivered in the western wing, where the music room stood. "It's like winter in here," she said, her breath visible despite the summer night. Thomas laughed, but I felt the air shift, growing dense, as if something was waking. They found the music room door ajar, its lock rusted away. Inside, the air was stale, the floor littered with debris. Sophia picked up a shred of paper, yellowed and brittle, a page from a fairy tale book, its edges singed. Then they heard it, a child's laughter, faint but unmistakable, coming from the walls. Marek called it the wind, but I knew better. The laughter grew louder, joined by footsteps pattering above, as if dozens of children were running through my upper floors. The group froze, their bravado crumbling. Lena whispered, "We should leave." But Marek insisted they stay, daring the others to follow him upstairs. They climbed my spiral staircase, its step groaning under their weight. On the 3rd floor, they found a nursery, its wallpaper peeling, its cribs overturned. The laughter stopped, replaced by a low hum, like a voice trapped in the walls. Tomas's flashlight flickered, then died. In the darkness, Sophia screamed. When the others relit their torches, she was gone, her backpack abandoned on the floor. Panic seized them. They searched, calling her name, but I felt her presence fade, as if she'd been pulled to the same void that had taken Elias and Clara. The hum grew louder, vibrating through my stones, and I saw it then, a shadow, tall and formless, gliding through the nursery. Marek bolted, dragging Lena and Thomas with him. They stumbled out into the storm, leaving Sophia behind. She was never found, her name added to the list of those I'd claimed. The final days. By 2017, I was a danger to all who entered. My walls crumbled, my floors gave way, and the Belgian authorities ordered my demolition. The Lietekirke Beauforts, my creators, turned their backs, refusing to save me. Bulldozers tore through my halls, reducing my grandeur to rubble. By 2019, most of me was gone, my stones scattered, my towers toppled. Only fragments remain, a few walls, a broken arch, a tower stump overrun by ivy. But I am not silent. The wind carries the whispers of those I held, Elias's frightened pleas, Clara's desperate sobs, Sophia's final scream. Urban explorers still come, fewer now, drawn by the legends that cling to my ruins. They speak of phantom footsteps, of laughter echoing in the forest, of shadows that move against the moonlight. Some claim to see children playing among my stones, their faces pale, their eyes empty. Others hear a woman's voice begging for help from a library that no longer exists. I am Château Miranda, a modern ruin, a vessel for the lost. My story is not one of rituals or relics, but of lives swallowed by my shadows. Each soul left a mark, etched into my crumbling bones. As the forest claims what's left of me, I wonder, will you come too? Will you walk my broken halls, feel the weight of my silence, and hear the whispers that never fade? Be warned, for I am hungry still, and my walls remember all. Story 8, Tonka Castle, Camdenton, Missouri, USA. I came to Tonka in the fall of 2025, chasing a story. As a freelance journalist, I'd built a modest following on X for my deep dives into abandoned places, but this one was different. The castle ruins in Camdenton, Missouri, weren't just another decaying relic. They pulsed with a reputation. Locals whispered about a curse, about dreams that turned to ash, about a place that seemed to reject anyone who dared claim it. I'd read about Robert Snyder's doomed mansion, the fire that gutted it, the decades of failure that followed. I wanted to know why. I wanted to feel it. My name is Clara Hensley, and this is what happened when I stayed too long at Tonka. It started innocently enough. I arrived at the state park on a crisp October morning, my backpack stuffed with a notebook, camera, and enough granola bars to last a week. The park was quiet, the trails mostly empty, except for a few hikers snapping photos of the natural stone bridge and the springs below. The castle ruins loomed above the Nyangwa Arm, their white limestone walls jagged against the gray sky. Steel braces held the crumbling arches in place, a reminder of the state's efforts to keep the structure from collapsing entirely. The 80-foot tower stood like a sentinel, its empty windows staring down at me. I felt a shiver, not from the cold, but from the weight of the place. It was as if the stones themselves were watching. My plan was simple: spend 3 days exploring, taking notes, and interviewing park rangers for my article. I'd booked a campsite nearby, but I'd also gotten permission to stay late at the ruins for some night photography. The rangers were friendly but firm. "Don't climb the walls," one said, a grizzled man named Tom, "and don't stay past midnight. The park's closed then, and it's not safe." I nodded, assuming he meant vandals or uneven footing. I didn't think much of it at the time. The first day was uneventful. I wandered the ruins, marveling at the scale of Snyder's ambition. The grand halls, though roofless, still echoed with the ghost of what could have been. I sketched the layout in my notebook, the tower, the main hall, the collapsed wings where Snyder's 90 rooms were meant to sprawl. I found the quarry site where his Scottish masons had carved the limestone, now overgrown with moss. The air smelled of earth and decay, and the only sounds were the wind whistling through the arches and the distant rush of the springs. I took dozens of photos, capturing the way the light filtered through the empty windows. By dusk, I was tired but exhilarated. This place was a gold mine for my story. That night, I set up my tripod near the tower for some long exposure shots. The moon was nearly full, casting the ruins in a pale, ghostly glow. I was alone, or so I thought. As I adjusted my camera, I heard a faint sound like footsteps crunching on gravel. I froze, scanning the darkness. Nothing, just the wind, I told myself. But then it came again, closer this time, from the direction of the main hall. I grabbed my flashlight and swung it around, expecting to see a raccoon or maybe a stray hiker. The beam caught only stone and shadow. "Hello?" I called, my voice echoing off the walls. No answer. I shook it off, blaming my imagination. But I packed up earlier than planned and headed back to my campsite. Sleep didn't come easily. I kept hearing those footsteps in my dreams. The second day, things got stranger. I returned to the ruins at dawn, determined to shake off the previous night's jitters. I started by exploring the outbuildings, or what was left of them. Most were little more than foundations, looted long ago. But one caught my eye. A small stone structure half hidden by vines, tucked behind the main hall. It wasn't on any park maps. The door was gone, and inside was a single room, empty except for a pile of charred wood in the corner. The air felt heavy, like stepping into a freezer. I snapped a few photos, but when I checked them later, they were blurry, as if the camera had shaken. I hadn't moved. By noon, I was back in the main hall, jotting down notes about the 1942 fire. That's when I found the carving. It was etched into a limestone block near the base of the tower, almost hidden by moss. RMS 1906. Robert McClure Snyder, the year he died. Below it were other initials, dozens of them, some fresh, some weathered. Park vandals, I assumed, but the sheer number unnerved me. Why here? Why this stone? I traced the letters with my finger, and for a split second, the world went silent. No birds, no wind, nothing. Then, a sharp crack, like a branch snapping. I spun around, heart pounding. A small stone lay on the ground a few feet away as if it had fallen from the wall above, but the wall looked intact. I didn't stick around to investigate. That afternoon, I interviewed Tom, the ranger. He was cagey when I brought up the curse. "People love their stories," he said, leaning against his truck. "Snyder's death, the fire, the way nothing ever worked out here, it's easy to call it cursed. But it's just a sad old place." I pressed him about the footsteps I'd heard, the carving, the stone. His face tightened. "Stay out of that back building," he said. "It's unstable, and don't go poking around at night. Things move." He wouldn't elaborate, and I left feeling more curious than ever. That night, I couldn't resist. I returned to the ruins, my camera slung over my shoulder, a headlamp strapped to my forehead. The park was deserted, the trails swallowed by darkness. I told myself I was just getting more photos, but deep down, I wanted answers. I headed straight for the mystery building. The air grew colder as I approached, my breath fogging despite the mild night. Inside, the pile of charred wood was gone. In its place was a single object, a rusted pocket watch, its face cracked, stopped at 3:17. I hadn't seen it the day before. I reached for it, but my hand froze mid-air. The footsteps were back, heavy and deliberate, coming from the main hall. I switched off my headlamp and crouched behind the wall, my pulse hammering in my ears. The footsteps stopped. Then a voice, low, guttural, barely human, muttered something I couldn't make out. It wasn't English. It wasn't anything I recognized. I stayed there, barely breathing, until the silence returned. When I finally dared to move, the watch was gone. I stumbled out of the building, my flashlight shaking in my hand, and ran back to my campsite. I didn't sleep at all. By the third day, I was a wreck. I hadn't eaten much, and my notes were a jumbled mess of half-formed theories. I knew I should leave, but the story, the truth, was pulling me deeper. I spent the morning combing through X-posts about Tonka, hoping for clues. Most were tourist photos or recycled folklore, but one caught my eye, a grainy image from 2018, posted by a hiker who claimed to have seen a figure in the tower at midnight. The caption read, "Not a ghost, but not normal." The figure was blurry, but it looked tall, angular, like a man in an old-fashioned suit. I saved the post and headed back to the ruins. I avoided the back building, focusing instead on the tower. It was roped off, but the barrier was flimsy, and I ducked under it. The stairs were gone, but a rickety ladder led to the first platform. I climbed, ignoring the creak of metal under my weight. At the top, the view was breathtaking. The Nyangwa arm glittering below, the forest stretching to the horizon, but the platform felt wrong. The air was too still, the silence too heavy. I noticed scratches on the stone, fresh ones like claw marks. Then I saw it, another carving, identical to the one below. RMS 1906. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen this yesterday. I was about to climb down when I heard it, a scream, raw and anguished, from somewhere deep in the ruins. It wasn't animal. It wasn't human either. I scrambled down the ladder, nearly falling, and sprinted toward the main hall. The scream came again, closer, from the back building. I stopped at the edge of the hall, torn between running and investigating. That's when I saw him. A figure stood in the doorway of the back building, tall and thin, dressed in a tattered suit. His face was wrong, too pale, too sharp, like a mask stretched over bone. He didn't move, just stared at me with eyes that weren't there. I blinked, and he was gone. I don't remember running to my car, but I was there, keys shaking in my hand when Tom found me. He didn't ask what happened, just told me to leave and not come back. I drove straight to my motel, packed my things, and left Camdenton that night. I tried to write the article, but every draft felt hollow. The photos I'd taken were corrupted, except for one. A shot of the back building with a faint figure in the doorway. I deleted it. I haven't been back to Tonka. I don't post about it on X. But sometimes at night, I hear footsteps outside my apartment. And last week, I found a rusted pocket watch on my doorstep. Stopped at 3:17. I don't know what's following me, but I know where it started. If you go to Tonka, don't stay past midnight. And whatever you do, don't touch the carvets. Story 9. The Shadows of Bhangarh. I should have listened to the warnings. Everyone in Alwar whispered about Bhangarh Fort, how its sandstone walls held secrets darker than the Aravalli nights. Don't go after sunset, they said, pointing to the Archaeological Survey's sign at the gate, its faded letters screaming caution. but I was never one for rules. My name's Vikram, a travel vlogger with a knack for chasing thrills. Abandoned forts, haunted forests, crumbling ruins, I'd seen them all. Or so I thought. Bhangarh was different. It wasn't just a place, it was alive. The first night, the invitation. I arrived at noon, the sun blazing over the Aravala hills. The fort sprawled before me, a labyrinth of sandstone palaces, temples, and bazaars frozen in time. Tourists milled about, snapping selfies by the carved gateways. Guides spun tales of a cursed princess and a spurned magician, their voices thick with practiced drama. I smirked. Folklore was just marketing for places like this. My plan was simple. Sneak in after dark, film the haunted ruins under moonlight, and rack up views on my channel. By dusk, the tourists had vanished. The fort's gates were chained shut, the ASI's warning sign glowing faintly under my flashlight. No entry after sunset. Violators will be prosecuted. I slipped through a gap in the wall, my camera strapped to my chest. The air grew heavy, the silence thicker than the forest beyond. My sneakers crunched on the sandy path as I passed the first temple, its spire stabbing the sky. The carvings, elephants, dancers, warriors seemed to shift in the shadows. Just the light, I told myself. I set up in the main palace, a crumbling maze of corridors and courtyards. The moon cast long shadows, turning pillars into jagged claws. I hit record. "Welcome to Bhangarh Fort, India's most haunted place," I whispered, my voice steady. "Let's see if the ghosts show up tonight." I panned across the empty halls, the camera's green light my only companion. For an hour, nothing happened, just wind whistling through broken arches. Then I heard it, a faint sob like a child lost in the dark. I froze, my breath catching. The sound came from deeper in the palace, echoing off the walls. I checked the camera. It was still recording, but the battery had dropped to 60%. Weird. I charged it fully that morning. I followed the sob, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. The air grew colder, my skin prickling. The corridor narrowed, leading to a small chamber with a collapsed roof. Moonlight spilled inside, illuminating a figure. It was a woman, her back to me, her long hair swaying as if caught in a breeze that didn't exist. She wore a tattered sari, its edges frayed like burnt paper. The sobbing stopped. My heart hammered. "Hello?" I called, my voice cracking. She didn't move. I stepped closer, the camera shaking in my hands. "Are you okay?" No answer. Then slowly she turned. Her face was wrong. Not disfigured, not monstrous, just wrong. Her eyes were too large, her mouth too wide, like a mask stretched over something not human. She stared at me, unblinking, and whispered, "You shouldn't be here." Her voice was layered, a chorus of tones that crawled under my skin. I stumbled back, tripping over a stone. When I looked up, she was gone. The chamber was empty. I checked the camera. The footage was corrupted, static where her face should have been. My battery was at 10%. I should have left then, but I didn't. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a hallucination from the eerie silence. I needed content. I pressed on, deeper into the fort. The second night. The pursuit. I barely slept that day. The woman's face haunted me, her voice looping in my head. I scoured the internet for answers. Local forums mentioned Bhangarh's legends, a princess, a magician, a curse, but nothing about a woman in a sari. Some posts claimed visitors heard screams or saw lights at night, but no one stayed long enough to find out more. The ASI's ban on nighttime visits wasn't just superstition, they said. People had gone missing, I had to go back, not for views, but for answers. I returned at midnight, slipping through the same gap in the wall. The fort felt different, angrier. The air buzzed like static before a storm. I avoided the palace, heading for the bazaar instead. Its empty stalls loomed like skeletons, their stone counters cracked and moss-covered. My flashlight flickered, then died. I cursed, switching to my phone's light. Footsteps echoed behind me, slow, deliberate, like someone dragging their feet. I spun around, but the path was empty. My phone's battery drained from 80% to 30% in seconds. "Who's there?" I shouted. The footsteps stopped. Then from the shadows of a stall I saw her, the woman in the sari. She stood motionless, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. "You came back," she said, her voice sharper now, cutting through the silence. "They're watching." "Who?" I demanded, backing away. She didn't answer. Instead, she glided forward, her feet not touching the ground. I ran, my breath ragged, weaving through the bazaar's alleys. The footsteps followed faster now, joined by whispers, dozens of voices, overlapping, unintelligible. I ducked into a temple, its walls carved with faded warriors. The whispers stopped. I crouched behind a pillar, my heart pounding. Hours passed. Dawn broke, painting the temple gold. The woman didn't appear again, but I wasn't alone. Carved into the pillar, fresh and deep, were words, "Leave or join us." My phone was dead, its screen cracked. I left the fort, vowing never to return, but I couldn't stay away. The third night, the descent. I was obsessed. I spent the day in Alwar, questioning locals. Most refused to talk about Bhangarh, their eyes darting nervously. An old shopkeeper finally spoke, his voice low. "The fort doesn't let everyone leave," he said. "Some become part of it." He wouldn't explain. I bought a new flashlight and a backup camera, determined to end this. That night, I entered through the main gate, prying the chain loose. The fort was silent, but the silence was heavy, like a held breath. I headed for the deepest part, the princess's chamber, a place guides avoided. The path twisted through courtyards choked with vines, the air thick with the scent of decay. My flashlight dimmed, but I pressed on. The chamber was small, its walls painted with faded murals of a woman with coal-lined eyes. Princess Ratnavati, I assumed. A stone platform sat in the center, etched with strange symbols. I set up the camera, its red light blinking. "This is it," I whispered. "The heart of Bhangarh." The air shifted, growing colder. My breath fogged. She appeared without warning, inches from me. The woman in the sari, her face closer now, her eyes bottomless. "You were warned," she hissed. The camera sparked and died. Shadows moved in the corners, shapes that weren't human, tall, thin, with limbs too long. They whispered my name, their voices a cacophony. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The woman grabbed my wrist, her touch ice cold. "Stay," she said, smiling. The shadows closed in. I screamed, thrashing, but they pulled me down into the stone floor. It wasn't solid anymore. It rippled like water, swallowing me. Darkness took over, filled with laughter, screams, and her voice. "You're ours now." The final night. The truth, I don't know how long I was gone. When I woke, I was outside the fort, sprawled on the sandy path. Dawn was breaking, the sky blood red. My clothes were torn, my skin scratched, but I was alive. My camera was gone, my flashlight shattered. I stumbled to my feet, the fort looming behind me. It looked ordinary now, just ruins under the sun. I left Alwar that day, but Bhangarh followed me. At night, I hear her voice, soft and mocking. You came back, she says. My dreams are filled with shadows, their long limbs reaching for me. I stopped vlogging. I don't go near ruins anymore. But I know the truth now. Bhangarh isn't haunted by ghosts. It's something worse, something that hungers, that collects. The woman in the sari wasn't a spirit. She was a warning. I ignored it. Don't make my mistake. Stay away from Bhangarh Fort. And whatever you do, don't go after sunset. Story 10. The Hollow Echoes of Lennox Castle. My name is Ewan McLean, and I'm not sure why I'm writing this. Maybe it's to warn you, or maybe it's just to get the screams out of my head. I was one of the last to walk the halls of Lennox Castle before it burned, and what I found there, it's not just a place. It's a wound in the world, bleeding memories that don't belong to the living. This is my story, pieced together from the nights I can't sleep, from the things I saw in that ruin, and from the voices that still follow me. It was September 2007, and I was 22, reckless, and chasing thrills with my mate Callum. We were urban explorers, sneaking into abandoned places around Glasgow for the rush of it. Lennox Castle was the Holy Grail, a crumbling fortress in Lennoxtown, its stone walls looming like a giant skeleton against the hills. Everyone knew its history. Built in the 1840s for some rich laird, turned into a hospital for the feeble-minded in the 1930s, and shut down in 2002 after decades of horror stories. Patients beaten, starved, locked away. The kind of place that didn't just close, it was buried, left to rot. But the castle itself still stood, empty and gutted, daring idiots like us to trespass. Think we'll see ghosts? Callum grinned as we ducked through a gap in the chain-link fence, our torches slicing through the dusk. The air was damp, heavy with moss and decay. I laughed, but my stomach twisted. The grounds were too quiet. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of our boots on gravel. We passed rusted bed frames and broken wheelchairs, scattered like bones, relics of the hospital's past. A castle loomed ahead, its windows black and jagged like eyes that didn't blink. The front door was gone, just a gaping hole. Inside, the air was colder, thick with the smell of charred wood and mildew. The 2008 fire hadn't happened yet, but the place was already falling apart. Peeling wallpaper, collapsed ceilings, and graffiti screaming, "Get out!" in red spray paint. Our torches caught glints of broken glass, and every step echoed too loud, like the castle was listening. "Let's check upstairs," I whispered, my voice sounding wrong in the silence. Callum nodded, but his grin was gone. We climbed the grand staircase, its banisters splintered, and reached a long corridor lined with doors. Nurses' quarters, they called this place back when the hospital was running. I pushed open the first door, and my torch beam landed on a rusted bed frame, a mattress sagging like it still held someone's weight. The walls were scratched, deep gouges like claw marks. I told myself it was vandals, but the hairs on my neck stood up. "Ewan!" Callum hissed, pointing his torch at the floor. There were footprints in the dust, not ours, small, bare, and fresh, like a child had walked through hours ago. We froze, listening. Nothing, but the air felt heavier, pressing on my chest. "Let's keep moving," I said, pretending I wasn't scared. We checked room after room, empty, trashed, some with old medical charts scattered like dead leaves. One had a single word scratched into the wall: hungry. Then we heard it, a low, wet sound like someone dragging a soaked mop across the floor. It came from the end of the corridor, where a door hung half off its hinges. My torch shook as I aimed it, catching the edge of something moving. Just a flicker, gone before I could focus. Callum grabbed my arm. "We need to go, mate." But I couldn't move. The sound came again, closer, and now it wasn't just dragging. It was a voice, faint and garbled, like a throat full of water trying to speak. I don't know why I walked toward it. Maybe I thought I could prove it was nothing. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and the smell hit me. Rotten meat and something sharp, like bleach. The room was bigger than the others, with a cracked mirror on one wall and a single chair in the center, its legs bolted to the floor. My torch swept the corners, and that's when I saw her. She was crouched in the shadows, her back to us, her hair long and matted, hanging to the floor. Her dress was tattered, stained dark, and her arms were too thin, like sticks wrapped in skin. She was muttering the same wet, choking sound we'd heard. My mouth went dry. "Hello?" I said, my voice cracking. Her head twitched just a little, but she didn't turn. Callum was pulling at my sleeve, whispering, "Ewan, please, let's go." But I took a step closer, and the floor groaned under me. She moved then fast, scuttling backward on all fours like a spider. Her face, God, her face was wrong. Her eyes were too big, too white, and her mouth stretched wide, showing teeth that didn't fit. She hissed, and I stumbled back, my torch dropping. The light spun, catching her in flashes as she crawled toward us. Callum screamed, and we ran, slamming the door behind us. Her nails scratched at the wood, a high, keening wail cutting through the air. We didn't stop running until we were back at the fence, panting, our torches barely working. Callum was crying, saying over and over, "What was that? What was that?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. We swore never to go back, never to talk about it. But that night, in my flat, I heard it again, the wet, dragging sound just outside my door. I didn't sleep for days. I tried to forget Lennox Castle. I stopped exploring, got a job at a warehouse, and told myself it was a hallucination, a trick of the dark. Callum moved away, and we lost touch. But the nightmares wouldn't stop. I saw her face, those teeth, and sometimes I'd wake up with scratches on my arms, thin and red like they'd just been made. By spring 2008, I was a wreck, jumping at shadows, hearing whispers in empty rooms. Then the news came. Lennox Castle had burned. A fire in April, cause unknown, gutted the building, leaving only the stone walls. I felt relief, like maybe whatever was in there was gone. But I had to know for sure. Against every instinct, I went back, alone this time, in broad daylight. The castle looked different, blackened, hollow, its roof caved in. The fence was still up, but I climbed over, my hands shaking. The grounds were eerily still, just like before. I walked through the ruins, stepping over charred beams and broken stone. The staircase was half collapsed, but I climbed what was left, reaching the corridor where we'd seen her. The door was gone, burned away, and the room was open to the sky. The chair was still there, its metal frame twisted from the heat. I stood there, heart pounding, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did, just silence. I was about to leave when I saw it, in the cracked mirror, still hanging on the wall. My reflection, but not quite. My eyes were wrong, too big, and my mouth was stretching just like hers. I backed away, tripping over debris, and that's when I heard the whisper, clear as day. "You saw me." It wasn't in my head. It came from the air, from the walls, from everywhere. I ran, faster than I'd ever run, and didn't stop until I was miles away. I moved to Edinburgh, thinking distance would help. It didn't. The whispers followed, faint but constant, always at night. You saw me. You know. I started researching Lennox Castle, digging into its past, hoping answers would quiet the noise. I found old hospital records online, grainy photos of patients in restraints, and testimonies from survivors like Huey McIntyre, who spoke of beatings and starvation. One article mentioned isolation rooms in the castle where difficult patients were locked for days, sometimes weeks. The room with the chair. It had to be one of those. Then I found a forum, a dark corner of the internet where urban explorers shared stories. One post from 2006 described a group seeing a crawling woman in Lennox Castle with eyes like moons. Another from 2009, after the fire, claimed the same figure was seen in the ruins. My blood ran cold. She wasn't gone. Whatever she was, the fire hadn't touched her. In 2010, I went back one last time. I don't know why. Maybe I thought facing her would end it. The castle was the same, a stone shell fenced off, now with warning signs about unstable walls. I went at dusk, armed with a torch and a knife, though I knew it wouldn't help. The air was thick, like before, and the silence pressed against my ears. I climbed through the ruins, finding the corridor, the room, the chair. The mirror was gone, shattered, but the chair was untouched, like it was waiting. I sat in it. I don't know why. My body just moved, and I sat, gripping the arms, staring into the dark. The whispers grew louder, a chorus now, saying my name, saying, "Stay." I felt hands on my shoulders, cold and bony, and something wet dripped onto my neck. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. Her face appeared in front of me, inches away, her mouth opening wider, wider, until it was all I could see. I woke up outside the castle, lying on the grass, my torch dead. My knife was gone, and my shirt was torn, with scratches across my chest. I stumbled home, and the whisper stopped. But I know she's still there, in the ruins, waiting. I don't sleep much anymore. When I do, I see her crawling through my dreams, her voice echoing, "You saw me. You'll always see me." I'm writing this in 2025, 18 years after that first night. Lennox Castle still stands, a ruin on the edge of Lennox Town, visited by ghost hunters and thrill seekers who don't know what they're chasing. I've never gone back, but I don't need to. She's with me, in the shadows, in the quiet moments. If you're reading this, stay away from that place. Don't look for her, because if you see her, she'll see you too, and she never lets go. Story 11. The Well of Whispers. My name is Mei Ling, and I'm not supposed to be here. Nobody is. The old Liu family mansion looms before me, its 3 stories of crumbling Baroque elegance swallowed by vines and shadows. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, and the silence is so heavy it presses against my chest. My friends dared me to come. Hao, Gia, and Wei, giggling over bubble tea at the cafe down the road. "Spend an hour inside," they said. "Prove you're not scared." I laughed it off, but here I am, phone flashlight trembling in my hand, standing at the rusted gate. The mansion's windows stare down like empty eyes, and I swear I hear a faint moan carried on the wind. It's 2025, and the Minxiong ghost house is a legend in Chiaya County. Built in 1929 by Liu Rongyu, a wealthy landowner, it was a marvel of its time. Ornate columns, tiled floors, chandeliers that glittered like stars. But the Liu family abandoned it just a few years later, leaving it to rot. By the 1950s, it was already a husk, its grandeur overtaken by neglect. Nobody knows why they left. Some say they moved to the city for business. Others whisper darker tales, a maid's betrayal, a well that traps her screams, soldiers who turn their guns on each other in a fog of panic. The stories are unverified, but they cling to this place like the vines choking its walls. Locals warn never to touch the courtyard well. They say it brings bad luck, or worse. I push the gate, and it creaks loud enough to make me flinch. The path to the mansion is overgrown, weeds crunching under my sneakers. My phone's light catches the peeling paint on the door, once a deep red, now faded to a sickly pink. I glance back at the road, half hoping to see Howe's scooter, but it's just darkness. I'm alone. I take a deep breath and step inside. The foyer smells of mildew and something sharper, like old metal. My light sweeps across a shattered chandelier on the floor, its crystals scattered like broken teeth. The staircase ahead spirals upward, its banister splintered. To my left, a hallway stretches into blackness. To my right, a doorway gapes, leading to what must be the courtyard. I know the well is there. I don't want to see it, but my feet move anyway, drawn by some morbid pull. The courtyard is open to the sky, moonlight spilling over cracked tiles. The well sits in the center, a low stone circle, its mouth yawning wide. I edge closer, heart hammering. The air here feels colder, heavier. I shine my light down, expecting to see water, but it's just darkness and endless drop. A faint sound rises, a low, keening wail like someone crying far away. I stumble back, my breath catching. It's just the wind, I tell myself, just the wind. But then I hear it again, clearer this time, coming from inside the house. A moan, soft and anguished. I whip around, light darting across the courtyard walls. Nothing. My phone buzzes in my hand, and I nearly drop it. It's a text from Gia. "You okay? Don't touch the well." I type back a shaky, "I'm fine," but my fingers tremble. I should leave. I should run. But I've only been here 10 minutes. If I bail now, I'll never hear the end of it. I head back inside, choosing the hallway to avoid the courtyard. The floorboards groan under my weight, and dust swirls in my light's beam. The walls are streaked with mold, but I can still make out faded wallpaper, floral patterns curling like veins. I pass a cracked mirror, and for a split second, I think I see something move behind my reflection. A pale shape, gone when I blink. My pulse races. I keep moving. The hallway opens into a dining room. A long table sits in the center, its surface warped and stained. Chairs are overturned as if someone left in a hurry. My light catches something on the table. A teacup, upright, untouched by dust. I freeze. That's not right. This place has been abandoned for decades. I step closer, and the air grows colder, my breath visible in the beam. The teacup is delicate, painted with lotus flowers. It's warm to the touch. I yank my hand back, heart pounding. A faint clink echoes behind me like porcelain tapping wood. I spin around, but the room is empty. The moan comes again, louder from upstairs. It's not the wind, it's human, raw with pain. I should leave. I know I should, but something pulls me toward the staircase. Maybe it's the dare. Maybe it's the need to prove I'm not imagining things. I climb, each step creaking, the banister wobbling under my hand. The second floor is a maze of rooms, doors hanging off hinges. The moan leads me to one at the end of the hall. The door is ajar, and my light reveals a small bare room with a single window. In the corner, there's a straw mat, stained dark, with something that looks like blood. I gag, covering my mouth. The moan stops, replaced by a whisper so soft I can't make out the words. It's coming from the mat. I step closer, my light shaking. The whispers grow louder, overlapping. Like a crowd of voices trapped in the walls, I catch fragments. "Help me!" He lied. "The well." My skin crawls. I back away, and my foot catches on a loose floorboard. I fall hard, my phone skittering across the floor. The light goes out. Darkness swallows me. The whispers surge, filling the room, clawing at my ears. I scramble for my phone, fingers brushing cold wood. Something grazes my ankle, a faint, icy touch, like fingers. I scream, kicking out, and my hand finds the phone. I fumble with it, the light flickering back on. The room is empty, but the whispers don't stop. They're everywhere now, echoing down the hall, calling my name. I run, not caring where I'm going. The mansion blurs around me, crumbling walls, broken furniture, shadows that seem to move. I reach the staircase and half fall down it, landing in the foyer. The front door is ahead, but the whispers are louder, pulling me back toward the courtyard. I don't want to go, but my body moves anyway, like I'm not in control. The well is waiting. It's different now. The moonlight doesn't reach it, as if the darkness is spilling out from inside. The moans are deafening, a chorus of agony. I edge closer, unable to stop. My light catches something in the well's mouth. Not water, not darkness, but a face, pale, eyeless, mouth stretched in a silent scream. It's her, the maid, the one who drowned. Her hands reach up, clawing at the stone, and I stumble back, tripping over a vine. The whispers scream now, a single word, "Stay." I scramble to my feet, running for the door. The mansion seems to fight me. Floorboards buckle, vines snag my legs. I burst outside, gasping, and don't stop until I'm at the gate. The cafe's lights glow in the distance, and I sprint toward them, my phone buzzing with missed calls from Hal. I don't look back. I can't. At the cafe, my friends crowd around me, faces pale. "What happened?" Gia asks. I can't speak, my throat raw. Wei points at my ankle, and I look down. There's a mark, 5 faint bruises like fingerprints. I pull my sleeve down, hiding it, and force a laugh. "Just tripped," I say. They don't believe me, but they don't push. That night, I can't sleep. The whispers follow me, faint but relentless, seeping into my dreams. I see the well, the face, the hands reaching. The next day, I check my phone's photos, hoping I imagined it all. There's one I don't remember taking, a blurry shot of the courtyard, the well in the center. In the foreground, almost too faint to see, is a figure in white, staring right at me. I delete the photo, but it doesn't help. The whispers are louder now, even in daylight. They call me back, promising answers, promising rest. I tell myself I won't go. I tell myself I'm safe. But last night, I woke up standing in my room, my shoes muddy, my hand clutching a pebble that smells of damp stone. I don't know how it got there. I don't want to know. The mansion isn't done with me. The well is waiting, and I'm afraid one night I'll answer its call. Story 12. The Los Feliz Murder Mansion. I am the house on Glendower Place, perched high on the Los Feliz hillside, my Spanish-style walls cloaked in ivy and secrets. For decades I've stood silent, my windows clouded with dust, my rooms frozen in a moment of unspeakable violence. They call me the Murder Mansion, a name whispered by neighbors and thrill seekers, who dare to approach my rusted gates. I've watched them come and go, their flashlights flickering like fireflies, their voices trembling with excitement or fear. But they don't know me, not really. They don't know what lingers in my shadows or what I've seen since that night in 1959. Let me tell you my story, piece by piece, as the walls themselves remember it. December 6, 1959, the night I broke. It was a cold, clear evening when the screams first tore through my halls. I was young then, my plaster fresh, my chandeliers gleaming under the glow of soft bulbs. The Pearlson family had lived within me for years. Dr. Harold, his wife Sylvia, and their 3 children. They seemed ordinary, their days filled with the hum of routine. Sylvia's heels clicking on my hardwood floors, the children's laughter echoing from the backyard. But that night, something snapped. I felt it before I heard it, a tremor in the air, like the house itself was holding its breath. Upstairs, in the master bedroom, Harold stood over Sylvia's sleeping form, a hammer clutched in his trembling hands. The first blow landed with a sickening crack, and I shuddered, my beams groaning as if in protest. Sylvia never woke. Blood seeped into the mattress, staining the sheets I could not clean. Harold moved like a man possessed, his footsteps heavy as he crossed the hall to his daughter's room. Judith, 18 and fierce, fought back. Her screams pierced my walls as she wrestled the hammer from his grasp, her younger siblings waking in terror. I wanted to help, to collapse my ceilings or fling open my doors, but I was only wood and stone, powerless to intervene. Harold fled to the bathroom, where he swallowed a deadly cocktail of acid and tranquilizers. By the time the police arrived, he was gone, sprawled on the tile floor, his eyes staring blankly at my ceiling. The children survived, though I don't know how. They left me that night, their footsteps fading down my driveway, never to return. I was alone, my rooms heavy with the weight of what I'd witnessed. Bloodstains darkened my floors, and the hammer lay where it had fallen, a silent witness to the madness. I waited for someone to come, to scrub me clean, to fill me with life again, but no one did. 1960, the keepers of my silence. A year later, I felt new footsteps on my porch. Emily and Julian Enriquez, a quiet couple, bought me from the bank. I thought they'd bring warmth, perhaps children to chase away the ghosts. But they didn't stay. They didn't even unpack. Instead, they turned me into a crypt for their belongings, stacking crates in my dining room, piling boxes in my parlor. They came and went, their visits brief, their voices low. I wondered if they sensed me watching, if they felt the chill that clung to my walls. They left everything as it was, the Pearlsons' furniture, their curtains, even their Christmas tree, its tinsel dulled by dust. The television in the living room stayed plugged in, its screen dark but waiting. Sylvia's dresses hung in the closet. Harold's books lined the shelves. The Enriquezes didn't touch a thing, as if afraid to disturb the past. I became a time capsule, sealed against the world, my windows grimy with neglect. Outside, the neighborhood changed. Los Angeles grew louder, brighter, its streets filling with cars and ambition. But I remained untouched, a relic of a darker time. Neighbors whispered about me, their eyes darting to my boarded windows. Children dared each other to touch my gate, running away with shrieks of laughter. I didn't mind. Their fear kept them at a distance, and I preferred the quiet. 1975. The first trespasser, the first to break in, came at midnight, a young man with a flashlight and a camera. I felt his pry bar splinter my back door, his boots crunching on the broken glass. He moved cautiously, his breath hitching as he stepped into my foyer. The air was thick with dust, and I could taste his fear, sharp and metallic. He wandered from room to room, snapping photos of the Christmas tree, the blood-stained mattress, the hammer still lying in the hallway. I watched him, curious. He was bold, this one, but not fearless. When he reached the attic, something shifted. A floorboard creaked under his weight, though he swore he hadn't moved. His flashlight flickered, casting wild shadows on the walls. He froze, his heart pounding so loudly I could feel it through my foundation. Then a whisper, not mine, but something deeper, something that lived in the cracks of my memory. He bolted, leaving his camera behind. I kept it, a trophy of his fear. After that, others came. Photographers, thrill-seekers, kids chasing legends. They all left something behind. A shoe, a flashlight, a scream. One woman, braver than most, climbed through a broken window in 1983. She roamed my halls for hours, sketching the furniture, the cobwebs, the eerie stillness. But in the basement, she screamed, clutching her arm. A black widow, she said later, had bitten her, its venom burning through her veins. I didn't see the spider, but I felt the house's satisfaction, as if it had protected me from her intrusion. 1990. The stray cats. Rudy Enriquez, the son of Emily and Julian, began visiting in the 90s. He was different from his parents, softer somehow, his eyes haunted. He never entered me, only stood on the porch, scattering food for the stray cats that gathered at my gates. I liked him, in my way. He didn't pry, didn't disturb, but I could feel his unease, the way his hand shook as he glanced at my windows. He knew what I held, even if he never spoke of it. The cats became my companions, their soft paws padding across my roof, their eyes glowing in the moonlight. They didn't fear me, and I was grateful for that. But even they avoided the basement, where the air grew heavy and the shadows seemed to move on their own. I began to notice things. Doors creaking open when no one was there, footsteps echoing in empty rooms. I told myself it was the house settling, the wood warping with age, but deep down I knew better. 2005, the night of the lights. One night in 2005, something changed. I woke to a strange hum, like electricity coursing through my veins. The old television in the living room flickered on, its screen glowing with static. I hadn't felt power in decades, yet there it was, a pulse of life I didn't understand. The chandelier in the dining room swayed, its crystals clinking softly. Upstairs, the hammer slid across the floor, stopping at the edge of the blood-stained rug. I wasn't alone that night. A group of teenagers had broken in, their laughter turning to screams as the lights pulsed. They ran, tripping over each other, their flashlights abandoned. One girl lingered, her eyes wide as she stared at the television. She said she saw a face in the static, a woman's face, bloodied and screaming. I didn't see it, but I felt it, a presence that wasn't mine. After that, the trespassers came less often, their stories growing wilder. I became a legend, a haunted house in a city that loved its ghosts. 2020, the sale. In December 2020, I felt a shift. Rudy Enriquez was gone, and strangers walked my grounds, their voices sharp with business. I was sold, they said, for $2.35 million. A developer eager to tear me down, to build something new. I braced myself for the wrecking ball, for the end of my story, but it didn't come. The developer boarded me up, left me to rot. My weeds grew taller, my paint peeled, my windows cracked. I was still here, still waiting. The cats stopped coming, the neighbors avoided my street. Even the trespassers stayed away, their curiosity dulled by time. But I wasn't alone. The shadows in my basement grew bolder, their whispers louder. They weren't Harold or Sylvia, not exactly, but fragments of them trapped in the walls like flies in amber. They moved at night, their footsteps heavy, their anger palpable. I tried to ignore them, to focus on the wind rattling my shutters, but they wouldn't let me. January 2025. The final visitor. Last night, someone new came. A woman, older than the others, with a flashlight and a notebook. She wasn't a thrill seeker, not like the rest. She moved with purpose, her steps steady as she climbed my stairs. She wrote in her notebook, sketching the hammer, the Christmas tree, the bloodstains that time couldn't erase. I watched her, wary but intrigued. She didn't flinch at the creaks or the cold that clung to my walls. In the basement, she stopped. The air was thick, the shadows alive. I felt them gather, their whispers rising to a scream. The woman's flashlight died, plunging her into darkness. She didn't run. She stood her ground, her voice low as she spoke to the air. I couldn't hear her words, but I felt the house respond, its anger softening, its shadows retreating. When her flashlight flickered back on, she was alone. She left at dawn, her notebook tucked under her arm. I don't know what she wrote or why she came, but for the first time in decades, I felt lighter, as if some part of me had been released. The shadows are still here, the whispers too, but they're quieter now, less hungry. I don't know what comes next, whether the developer will return, whether my walls will fall, but I've told my story as best I can. I am the lost Feliz.